Tomorrow evening sees a Top of the Pops special, in which we play every good song from the 90s in its entirety. So, that should be a great 10 minutes. Up now, however, the 80s Nostalgia podcast. This week's guest is a celebrity jungle survivor, an occasional facial hair sporter, and a radio and TV presenter. Iain Lee.
Technology working at its finest. Nice to talk to you, man.
It is so weird you can speak to anyone from any room in your house nowadays.
It's nuts.
It used to be at the bottom of the stairs on a landline that was tied to a wall.
Yep. And now I'm sat in an office with a bunch of idiots in it. And not you, Catherine. You're not an idiot. Do apologise. Just trying not to look ridiculous. I've got a headset on because I didn't bring my microphone, so I'm wearing a headset. I hope it sounds all right.
Perfect, yeah, not a problem.
Let's have fun.
Well, it's like a light-hearted reminisce just about the 80s and things that are classed as retro nowadays. Nothing overly heavy. The heaviest I was planned on going was to share my frustration with you that you've got rid of your moustache.
Yeah, I did that today. I got rid of that. I only had it for a few weeks, and then today I just went, I'm done.
What was all that about? Why did you get rid of it?
Well, I tell you why. I woke up this morning and I found out that I've got a bit of TV work in July, and then I thought, would I wear this moustache on TV in July? And I thought I probably wouldn't. And so I just thought, I might as well get rid of it now. It was, it just felt right. But I think the moustache worked, and I am not against bringing it back at a later date. I think it worked. But the amount of abuse I got just for growing a moustache, it's incredible. I was called terrible things.
On your own face as well.
Yeah, I know. It's outrageous. Listen, guys, beards are gone. I got rid of my beard. They're gone. They're out. The moment is... I'm looking at a picture of me with a moustache now. And why am I saying moustache? Moustache. It's because you said moustache. Moustache. It looks good. But, it'll come back. It'll come back one day.
And speaking of mustache and moustache,
yes,
there's loads of words people syllabize incorrectly, like caravan and caravan.
Who says caravan? I'll kill them. One of my friends says Star Wars.
Oh, no. That's not the correct way of doing it.
No, it's not. And he's like a really big Star Wars fan, or Star Wars fan. And I've not actually mentioned it to him. Maybe I will. I'm going to be speaking to him soon. I will have to pull him up on Star Wars.
Right. So when you were at school, did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy the experience of learning?
No.
Not at all?
No, I didn't. I didn't like school. I was bullied a bit. I'm going to be honest. I did quite a bit of bullying myself. I was not the most pleasant of people, and I didn't really study very much. I just messed around with my mates, and then did really badly in all my exams. So no, I didn't really like school. Also, my sister was 3 years older than me. She was brilliant at school. She's really clever. And as soon as I started getting compared to her by the teachers, I thought, stuff that. I'm not playing that game. I'm out. So I just messed around too much. I enjoyed being an idiot, really. I think school is wasted on kids. I think, you should, for the first 25 years of your life, you should be allowed to do what you want. And then you have to go to school for 10, 12 years. Because that's when I wanted to learn, in my mid-20s.
I mean, if you think, people pick their options when they're like 13. It's designed to go on to what they want to do for the remaining 50 years of their life. It's just too early to do it.
This is another reason I hated school. So you pick your options for your GCSEs, and I picked drama because I hated science and maths and all of that. I picked drama. I thought this is going to be my saving grace. I'm going to be an actor and I'm going to do drama. It's the only thing I was good at. And I turn up for school September, the year we start our GCSEs, on a Monday, and they said, right, everyone who's picked drama, we've dropped it. So you've got to pick something else by 11 o'clock this morning. It was nuts, man. And you know how you kind of fret, and because the way it was done in our school, I seem to remember there were like 5 columns with subjects in, and you had to pick one from each column and then maybe 2 other subjects or something. I don't quite remember it, but it was something like that. So it was all mathematically worked out. And then they said, yeah, that you're dropping drama, so you got to pick another subject. And I was gutted. Other people were like, oh, that's a shame. And I was gutted. That was going to be the one thing that was going to keep me sane throughout the 2 years of doing my GCSEs. And then when they dropped that, that's when I thought, F you, that's you're doing this deliberately.
We had a similar thing. They dropped our CDT, Craft Design Technology course, and there were 15 of us, and they needed 20 for the course to run. But they kept open the music course with 3 of us on it. I never understood that one.
School was a con in the 80s. I don't look back on it very fondly. I didn't really, I had a laugh, but it was a waste. It was a waste of time for me.
Did computers or games consoles feature at all for you?
Yes, of course they did. We, at school, now, yes, we had one in middle school. We were in one of those, not everyone knows what middle school is. I don't really know, but we had primary school, then we had middle school, and then I did my 11 plus, and I went to a grammar school. And in the middle school, we had an Acorn Electron and a BBC Model B. Of course, no one wanted to play on the Acorn Electron because it was rubbish. And we had a BBC, and I was obsessed with it. And there was lunchtime computer club, and you had to, I think it was I guess on Monday. Was it Friday? No, it was probably Monday. You had to put your name in. So lunchtime was an hour, and I think the computer club was 2 half-hour sessions. You had to put your name in when you wanted to use the computers at lunchtime, and I think you could only put your name in maybe 3 times throughout the week, and there could only be 2 or 3 of you in at a time, and so you had to try and pair up with your mates. And so, yeah, a lot of my lunchtime was spent hanging around the BBC Micro, playing games, and learning to program a bit. I learned how to program a bit. I would be one of those kids who on a Saturday morning, this is when I was about 10, 11, my mum would go into Slough, and my mum would go off to do her shopping for 2.5, 3 hours, and she would leave me in either WH Smith's with the computers, or preferably it was Boots. Boots had more computers and a bigger selection. I think the Smiths in Slough only had a Spectrum, and they didn't always have games loaded up on it. And I had real trouble programming on a Spectrum. I think it was just a Spectrum they had. Whereas Boots, you had a Spectrum, you had a Commodore, you had a BBC, you had an Oric for a while. I think they even had an MSX for a while lined up. And they would have games. They would have games on there, so you could go and play games. But if they didn't have games, if we went to, I think it was Uxbridge or Staines, where they had John Menzies, and they didn't have games, I would go. This is how geeky I was. I would go and write like quizzes and stuff on the BBC. And hi, what is your name? And then you type in your name, and I don't really remember. I think that then becomes a string value, and it'll go, oh, hi, Steve. Would you like to do a quiz? No. Oh, well, have a nice day. Or yes. Okay, here's your first question. And then it would give you questions. And then I even worked out the programming so that it would give you a score out of 10. And I would stand there. It would take me about 25 minutes to program it. And then I would step back and I would watch people play my quiz that I had written.
You could have got games released,
Yeah, I probably could have done, because so many of them, when you look back, were absolutely lousy. I couldn't do graphics, and I couldn't do machine code. I could only do basic. I could only do text. I wasn't going to do. Well, I tried to do a text-based adventure. There was this really clunky thing on the BBC Micro called, what was it called? The Graphics Adventure Creator, GAC. And I tried quite earnestly to try and write a graphical adventure based around the Monkees, of course, on there. And I just couldn't do it. It was a bit too complicated for me, I'm afraid.
I'd have loved to play that.
Yeah, well, if I'd have done it, it would have been great, but I couldn't do it. It was beyond my skills, really. But now when I get a computer, I've got a load of retro computers now, the BBC and the Spectrum and stuff. And as soon as I plug it in, I print 10 print, Iain is cool, 20 go to 10. That's kind of the limit of my programming skills these days.
So what programs had you running home to watch TV when you were young?
Monkey Magic, obviously. I remember my friend Orlando Kelly. We must have been 8 or 9. Orlando Kelly telling us about this weird Chinese program, although later found out it was Japanese, about a Chinese legend. This weird Chinese program that was hilarious, and we had to watch it. It had kung fu in it, and I was really into Bruce Lee and stuff. And I remember sitting on my mum's lap watching I think the first episode I ever saw of Monkey Magic was the one where Pigsy and Sandy drink the water of fertility and they both become pregnant. And I just remember watching this, and it just, I want to say BBC 2, 5:45 on a Tuesday, but I could be wrong. And it just blew my tiny mind. The fact it was dubbed, the fact that it was hilarious, the fact there was wicked fighting in it, the bit where he pulled his chest hairs and jumped on a cloud. And here's the thing. This is how nuts I was. I was really into the Monkees. I've always been into the pop group, the Monkees. And I was convinced for a long time that Pigsy in Monkey Magic was played by Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees, because he looked a bit like him. And in my head, I just thought that Dolenz had this weird contract where he could only appear in shows that had the word monkey in the title. That's how nuts we were back in the day.
Do you have any unpopular opinions or anything that you think might be seen as an unpopular opinion, like anything that other people raved about that you never saw the appeal of?
Yeah. I've got one. Street Hawk was better than Knight Rider.
That is a weird one.
Yeah, it was better, because I kind of missed out on the Knight Rider phenomenon, right? The night that they showed the TV movie of Knight Rider, like a 2-hour episode that set up the whole thing, I saw it advertised and I thought, oh, that looks rubbish. Talking car and some fat old man? No. I'm not. I'm going to watch something on BBC Two called Return to Forbidden Planet, or Forbidden Planet, that old sci-fi movie from the 50s. And I chose that. So the next day at school, I went in. Of course, everyone's talking about Knight Rider. And I'm going, no, I didn't see it. And so then I felt like I've never seen the first episode of Knight Rider. I got into Knight Rider and I loved it. I remember I had a little black and white portable TV, and I remember I was really ill. I used to get really bad migraines. I remember lying in bed with a migraine, shivering and hallucinating and stuff, but not turning off the badly tuned TV so that I could watch Knight Rider. Because I was obsessed with it. But I think Street Hawk was better. I think the guy was cooler. I thought motorbikes are cooler than cars. Here's another one. Blue Thunder is better than Airwolf.
You know what? I agree with that one. It was more gritty. It was more accurate.
I didn't care about Jan Michael Vincent's brother St. John. I didn't care about him. Didn't care. You know what my brother is? I do, but you got to give me the chopper back. You're not going to get the chopper. Oh, well, we'll drag this out for as many seasons as we can. But it was on, I think it was Saturdays at 1 o'clock, and it was the only thing to watch then. There was nothing else on, so you watched. But I loved all those Saturday evening. I loved all those. There was a lot of shows that got lost in the shadow of Knight Rider. Manimal, of course. But for me, the big one was Automan. I used to love Automan.
Love that.
I remember them. I remember Frank Boff talking about it on breakfast time, and I just thought, yeah, mate, this is for me, because it was computery and it was nerdy. Computers were in a lot of things. There were a lot of acoustic couplers and hacking on TV in the 80s, and this had a computer. It had a nerdy guy I think was called Eugene, but I'm not sure. There was a cursor. Automan's suit looked cool. His car turned at 90 degrees angles. That was great. I was so gutted when they cancelled that.
Yeah, that was the business. It was like seeing Tron every week.
It was like seeing Tron every week. Definitely.
But music must have been quite a big thing in your childhood. You mentioned Monkees before. Have you always been into the Monkees?
Yeah, I was, because for several reasons, right? The first records I ever got were when I was about 6. So this would have been in the late 70s. Excuse me, 80s fans. We will jump forward a couple of years in a minute, I promise. And I got an old dance set record player, and I got a load of records, including the 1812 Overture, the Black and White Minstrel Show, and also the Monkees' first album and the I'm a Believer single. And so I preferred those over the Black and White Minstrel Show. I enjoyed those. And then the Monkees was on every school holiday. Every school holiday, 9:25 weekdays, they just put the Monkees on. And it was brilliant. And this was all through the 80s, late 70s, 80s. And this was before their kind of big reunion in 1986. This was, I remember watching it 81, 82, 83. 9:25, school holidays, they'd show the Monkees, and I just thought it was a new current show. Why don't you the Monkees? I just thought, okay, right, this is a current show. So that they were huge for me. Here's the thing, here's the controversial thing. I don't really like 80s music very much.
Okay.
There we go. This is where it gets murky. I don't really like 80s music. The first current band I liked when I was young, and this was before I was 11, because I remember we still lived in Slough, I liked the Thompson Twins, and I remember confessing to my sister, I think I quite like the Thompson Twins, and I got the Into the Gap album on cassette, taped by someone, and I liked that. I liked that album a lot. And then as I got older, I got into the pop. I was really big into Jason Donovan. I remember, and this was when I was 16 years old, I guess. And I got really into Jason Donovan to the point where I even went to see him in concert at the Hammersmith Odeon. I would tape him on the TV, and I had a huge argument with some people at school. They were saying that Kylie was obviously better. I went, no. You watch. 20 years' time, we're still going to be seeing Jason Donovan. You won't even know who Kylie Minogue is. So I had a habit of backing the wrong horses in the 70s and the 80s, including I lost badly in the great VHS beta wars of the 80s. I lost very, very badly in that war.
So you backed Betamax?
Mate, we had the first video recorder in our street. It was hidden behind the sofa. We weren't allowed to tell anyone about it because I think it was stolen. I think they were hooky goods, and it was Betamax, and it was this big, chunky, two suitcases on top of each other, slightly smaller but very thick on top of each other, and it was supposed to be portable. And what that meant was the bottom bit was the tuner that did the TV channels, and the top bit was where the cassette went, and you could take that off and put a strap around it and connect it to a video camera, which we didn't have, and go off and make movies and stuff. Make movies, what am I talking about? So we had that, and then that broke down quite quickly, and we got another stolen one, but it's Betamax. Here's the thing, right? It was better quality. Everybody knows that Betamax is infinitely better quality than VHS. And even for a bit, we had on the Farnham Road, we had two branches of City Video, right? On one side, the bigger side, it was City Video VHS. On the other side, quite a significantly smaller, was City Video Beta. And City Video Beta didn't last very long. And then after a while, you'd go into video shops. Have you got any Betamax? Yeah, they're in that corner there. But what was great was I was really into Bruce Lee in the 80s. And it meant that quite often video shops were getting rid of their Betamax stock. So you could go in, and this is like as an 11-year-old kid, right? And go, that copy of Big Boss, do you want to sell it? And they go, yeah, it's 10 quid. And you'd buy these 11-year-old buy an X-rated film. Big Boss has got but a lot of them got boobs in as well. And I bought loads of secondhand Betamax videos from these shops. X-rental, that was the phrase, wasn't it? X-rental.
You were right, though. You're completely right. Betamax technically was a better picture. It was designed better inside.
Yep.
And more robust.
Yep.
I don't get why VHS actually won.
It's because I think I've got this right. It's whichever company did make Betamax, and I think it was Sony, they refused to license it to anyone else. Whereas whoever it was did VHS saw money in licensing it and thereby making it the default brand. And also pornography went to VHS. It sounds like a joke, but it's not. I've read a really interesting article about how the porn industry chose VHS, and that made it, that kind of seals its fate, really. Hope that answers your questions.
It thoroughly does.
Good.
I've noticed that you stream on Twitch, and
Yes.
I've never streamed in my life. I don't think it's for me, but I love watching streams. What got you into streaming?
I like streaming stuff on YouTube. It just the thought, we used to stream the radio show on YouTube and Periscope, and I like the idea of you being able to do a live broadcast that people can interact with. And we would stream my radio show on Periscope quite a lot, and then we got told we're not allowed to do that anymore. And you get quite a few viewers and quite a few hits, and it was that thing of thinking, well, how do I monetize this? Not to fleece people, but is there a way of, I'm putting a lot of work into this, and we did a few different projects on YouTube, like did a live chat show on YouTube with me and my friend Catherine, and we had guests and stuff like that. And I thought, okay, well, this is great, and a lot of people are watching it, but how do we monetize it so that we can make it better? And I looked around, and Twitch seemed to be the only working model of being able to get some form of reliable revenue from going online. And it's not much, it's a couple $100 a month, but it was certainly more than Periscope, and more than YouTube was getting. There's an option. You don't have to subscribe, you don't have to donate, you don't have to do these things. On YouTube, I was saying, look, if you've enjoyed this, here's PayPal. If you want to give us a quid or something, that'd be great. And no one did. Whereas Twitch, it feels a bit more, people seem a bit more inclined to support the artists. And what I'm doing on there mainly at the moment, it's just me in bed because I'm so tired, but it's streaming retro video games. So you come to twitch.tv/Iain Lee, twitch.tv/Iain Lee, and you follow. You can subscribe if you want. It's free if you've got Amazon Prime. You don't have to, though. And I sit and I play PlayStation and a bit of Sega Saturn, and I've got a modded BBC Micro that's got a USB drive in it, and I'm not set that up yet, but I'm going to be streaming that. And I was streaming some Spectrum games the other day. So, yeah, it kind of ties in nicely with what you're doing with this podcast.
What have been the best games to stream? What systems have been the best reactions?
Spectrum, I would say. Spectrum has been pretty good. Sega's Dreamcast went down very well. Spectrum was good. The plan is, so I'm streaming it through my Mac, and it's really tricky to connect to BBC to a Mac, unsurprisingly. The newer machines, from about the sort of mid-90s onwards, it's easy to do because you get the RCA leads. But with I haven't quite worked out how I'm going to do it with the BBC, but the plan is hook that up and play Elite, the original Elite, and stream that. That's what I want to do, but I can't quite get my head around how I'm going to do it.
That'd get a good audience, I think. People love watching Elite.
Yeah, I think it would. I think it would go down really well. So I just need to work out exactly how I'm going to do it. But that's the plan, yeah.
Have you tried Antstream?
Oh, yeah, I have tried Antstream. It's great. Love it. Love it. Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. I've only had a quick fiddle with it, and I need to try it a bit more. I want to try it on my PlayStation, actually, and see how it works on there. But I love it. I think it's great. I think it's really cool. There's some great games on there, and I'm a big fan of it, definitely.
And do you think that any of the games that were produced in the 80s that were ace at the time have held up? Are they still as ace nowadays?
Are they still as ace? Yeah, some of them are. A lot of them are. I would say Elite, I think, is the greatest game of all time. How did they get 10,000 planets on a 32K machine? I just don't understand it. I do not understand how they crammed all of that in there. I still got a soft spot for Ghostbusters on the Spectrum. I think that's a great game. Graphically, obviously, they're nothing like what you're going to get now on a PS4 or an Xbox. But I think there's something very charming about them. I tell you what, my kids' favorite game on my phone is Repton. Do you remember Repton on the BBC? They play it all the time. Repton. My kids are playing Repton, and they love it. Absolutely love it. They just keep going back to it. So And that's a great game. It's a great puzzle game. Jetpack is a great game. I was never a big fan of Manic Miner, but there is a lot of good games there, I think.
Talk me through what you do nowadays. You're on the radio. You've been on the radio for a few decades.
I've been on the radio for a long time. At the moment, I'm on talk radio, and it's me and my friend Catherine Boyle, and it's called the Late Night Alternative, and it's on weeknights from 10 o'clock. And we kind of do, everyone else is talking about Brexit and about Tory leadership and all that boring stuff. And we try and do the exact opposite. We go in and we have a laugh. And I should say, if anybody stopped listening because the show got a bit heavy, it did get a bit heavy for a while, come back. The Giggle Factory is open again. We just go in and we just mess around. And sometimes it gets a bit dark. You know, people will talk about mental health and stuff like that. And that's great. But we just go in and mess around and have a laugh and try and make each other laugh. And we get some wonderfully weird callers, and we get some slightly confused callers who aren't weird but think they phoned up a normal radio show. And it's very, very silly. And there's a podcast of that. If you go to iTunes or Acast and type in Ian Lee and Talk Radio, that comes up. And there's also another podcast that me and Catherine do, which is kind of the adult version of that, and that's called The Rabbit Hole. And The Rabbit Hole is a live phone-in show where we go around the country to small theatres and art centres and places like that, and an audience comes, and we sit and we do a 2-hour improvised sort of comedy show, and people phone in and take part, and the audience take part, and we have a laugh. And I think we've just put out episode number 83. So, you know, it's going well. People seem to like it. So we just basically, my job is to piss around with my best mate. That's it. And I absolutely love it. I love it. It's the greatest.
Now, I've heard you interview on your podcast, because as well as you put in clips of episodes, you also do interviews on there.
Yes.
And you've had some huge 80s names. Ones I'm genuinely jealous of, like Chaz Hodges from Chaz and Dave.
Chaz. Well, Chaz was, poor old Chaz. What a loss. He was my friend's father-in-law, a guy called Paul Garner, who I met. He used to be a writer on the 11 o'clock show. And I remember going around to his house once. He said, "Do you want to come in and meet the father-in-law?" I said, "No, not really." He said, "No, go on. I think you'll want to." I said, "Nah, not really." He said, "No, go on, come in." And I walked in, and there's Chaz sat there. And he was the most charming, delightful person, really interested in you, happy to share his stories. And I got an hour. We met him a few times, and he very kindly invited me to his gig at the Royal Albert Hall, and I went backstage, and I had a lovely hour in Paul and Kate's living room, and just chatting with Chaz. And then he played the piano, and then I played a Beatles song on a ukulele, and he sang along with me. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. The thing is, they were great, and then they became a joke, and then they stuck around long enough to become great again. And I think their best songs are as good as, if not better, than the best songs the Kinks ever did. You know, they sum up a certain place and a certain period of England, and it's their poetry, absolute poetry. They're great. And he was what people don't know about Chaz is he was a brilliant musician, and there was a Beatles reunion in the 70s. Were you aware of this?
No.
There was three of the Beatles reunited at Eric Clapton's wedding in, I think, 1979. I'm not sure. And they got up on stage drunk. There was Paul McCartney, there was George Harrison, and there was Ringo Starr, and there was Chaz Hodges on piano. Chaz Hodges was John Lennon for a night. You know, that's pretty amazing. And no one knows that. No one knows that. And he hung out with Jerry Lee Lewis. You know, he was friends with Jerry Lee Lewis and Gene Vincent, good friend with Gene Vincent. And he worked at Joe Meek's place. You know, what Chaz has seen, he's met and played with pretty much everyone.
And you've also had Frank Sidebottom.
Oh, lovely Frank. Poor old Chris Seavey. I was a huge fan of Frank. My first gig was 1988 or 89. It was at what used to be London Central Poly, and we went to see Frank Sidebottom. It also on the bill was a band that became one of my favourite bands, the Man from Del Monte, who were managed by John Ronson. Great little indie band. There was also Tenpole Tudor and Pete Shelley from the Buzzcocks. But we went to see Frank, and it was I saw him so many times as a kid. Then I sort of went off him a bit when I was at uni and stuff, and he kind of disappeared. And then when I was working on LBC a few years ago, did we get offered him or did I hunt him down? I can't remember. But Frank Sidebottom came on my show, and I'd forgotten how funny he was and how innovative and how brilliant he was. And that first show he did with me, he had the head on, and at the end of it he said, "You're going to hate me now, boss." And he took his head off, and that was the first time I'd ever met Chris Seavey, and we became friends, and I appeared on his TV show, and I did a couple of gigs with him, and he came on my radio show a few more times, and he had an idea for a game show for me. And I loved Chris. I loved Frank. I wish he'd lived long enough for my kids to have met him, because they would have loved him as well. Yeah, such a nice bloke. Bonkers, his own worst enemy. But just have you seen the Chris Seavey story, the documentary about him?
Absolutely, yeah. Back that as soon as I've heard about it.
Man, what a film! What a film! And I run this isn't actually a plug, but I guess it is a plug. Why not? I run a small little record label, 7A Records. You can find us on facebook.com/7A Records, and we put out Monkees stuff. But we were lucky enough to put out the soundtrack to being Frank, the Chris Seavey documentary, and we put out a limited edition vinyl LP, 500 copies. Boom, that sold out. The CD is still out there, and it just felt right to be part of that project and to kind of, little salute to Chris. And he brought me so much happiness and so much joy, and he was wonderful. Just a really nice man.
Cool. Well, I think I'm going to have to let you go.
Are we done? Thank you, Craig. Well, hang on. Let me ask you, because I heard you do an intake of breath when I said I didn't really like 80s music. That must have been like I heard it. That must have been a punch to the gut. I'm guessing, obviously, you love 80s music.
Complete honesty, I didn't like it at the time. I only got into it in the late 90s when I realised how bad 90s music was.
Wasn't it awful? Wasn't it awful? My God,
yeah.
The Blur Oasis wars, and everyone's going, this is great. I'm going, no, they're both terrible.
And also, as well, if you were to ask me what my favourite decade of music was, it would be 85 to 95.
Right, okay, yeah.
And the reason that I kind of went back to my girlfriend's house at the time was because she had a Jason Donovan album.
Right, yep.
And I wanted to get a copy of it.
Great, what a song, man. What a song. I went to Mike Stock's house last year, maybe a couple of years ago, to interview him. Flipping it, man. It's not a house, it's a mansion. It took him, this isn't an exaggeration, it took him 3 minutes to walk from his front door to the end of the drive where I'd parked my car. It was incredible. So, and I love... I can dig a bit more 80s music now. At the time I hated it. I was very much a 60s head, but I've got a really big, a lot of affection for Stock Aitken and Waterman. I think they were great. They were the Motown. They were the British Motown of the 80s. No, they were great. They were geniuses, and I stood up for them at the time. Actually, I seem to remember. But and I like the hits, but I tell you what, I really struggle with the 80s music is that snare sound, that really that sort of electronic snare sound. That doesn't really work for me. But yeah, no, I've got some 80s stuff. Of course, I have. Tango in the Night. I mean, come on.
Anything with Sonia or Jason Donovan or Mel and Kim.
Mel and Kim.
And Chaz and Dave. Obviously, that's all I've got nowadays.
Good for you. Good for you.
Who's that now? Hello? Not you again.
Hello, it's Mr. Man here. I'll tell you who's mad, pal. I said I'll tell you who's mad.
Who?
Duncan Newmarch. That's who's mad. He thinks he's stuck in the 80s. Raving mad, pal.
Yes, thank you.
Stuck in the 80s. Duncan Newmarch.
By the way, did I tell you I was mad?
Spend an hour in the 80s. Duncan's there all the time.
Stuck in the 80s. Available now on... What's this? SoundCloud. What's SoundCloud? Is that a cassette?